Hey and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a look at a video that is a bunch of women telling their worst piercing stories. It will be good to see from like a client's perspective what has gone wrong with their piercings, and I can give you some insight into what I think may have happened.
I was about 22 or 23. I decided I wanted to get a different kind of piercing because I had already had a lot of the more normal ones like belly button and the different ear ones, but I decided a dermal would be a really great one to do. It's like a little sliver of metal that they embed in your skin. A lot of people have them in their back dimples, or they'll have them like on their collarbones and things. I decided to get it on my ring finger. But the longer that the dermal is in your body, your skin is growing. And
when people get them in their fingers, it's probably the worst spot you can get them. There's not really a whole lot of flesh to grab onto to do the dermal, let alone like there's not a lot there for your body to properly like take it on. That's why a lot of them can reject, but especially in your fingers, when you think about it, your hands are always like grabbing things, going into bags. Your hands do a lot of things, and they're gonna get caught on so many things. Even like your rings get caught on stuff. Imagine having something like attached to you getting like ripped and torn, because it like happens so much. I've had to put them in like the top part of the finger there, and that like it feels sick to do because like there's like nothing there. It's like a biopsy punch basically, and you have to put that in there. And there's just like, if you try and squeeze that part of your finger, there's just like not a whole lot to grab onto, and you need a chunk to grab onto to be able to do the punch. Like obviously she had it like down here on her ring finger, I think she said. Still terrible idea.
grasping onto that dermal. So eventually it started to heal up and look normal, and I thought that it was completely healed. And I was at Venice Beach one day and I stuck my hands in the ocean, and the next day I started to notice that my finger was a bit red. I got a little bit of the ocean water into my piercing, and so I was like, oh, it's starting to get a little red, a little bit redder. Oh, my hand's swelling. Oh, my arm's swollen. Like literally my whole entire hand was just like this big, massive, red, awful, swollen looking thing. And I thought that it would just go away. I didn't realize the severity of the infection. So I let it go, and it just kept swelling and swelling. And finally, when my friend noticed how swollen it was, that's when I decided I really needed to get my butt to the doctor.
Wow, I can't imagine leaving something for that long. Like people definitely do, even with piercings that people will come in and show us, and we're just like, wow, how did you let it get this up? Especially with something like this where you can't remove it yourself. Like you'd think you'd be a little more concerned if you're like entire arm is swollen. Like that's not normal at all. It's not normal in general, just because like if she'd had it for some time, which it sounded like she had, touching ocean water shouldn't do that to it unless the dermal itself was already like starting to migrate, like rejecting out of her body. There were like openings in it then. That's potentially what could have happened here, and like some bacteria's got in there and it's just been like, nah, we done, we out of here.
Gave me antibiotics, and there wasn't really much she could do for the numbing. So she had to rip, because as I said, the dermals, they embed into your skin. So she had to rip it out, and I was just screaming at the top of my lungs at the med center. And eventually it came out, and the antibiotics worked, and I've got a whole hand.
Yeah, wow. So like even if you go to a doctor, they shouldn't just rip and rip it out. What kind of doctor did you go to? Did you go to I went to the worst rated doctor in all of Venice Beach? Potentially. A doctor isn't just gonna rip that out. They have scalpels and they have tools. If it's properly grown in, they can cut a dermal out with like scalpels and stuff. Whereas piercers don't have scalpels, because if we were cutting dermals out with like scalpels, it comes under like a medical procedure and we're not allowed to do that. But a doctor shouldn't have like rip because they don't know how to properly like take them out. The way they would take them out is by cutting it out. When I got my dermal removed, I got it taken out by a doctor, and they cut it out with like a scalpel with like tiny little cuts and a tiny little like tiny little stitches to sew it all together.
This all happened on my 18th birthday is like when everything initially started. I really wanted to get my nose piercing because my parents didn't let me get my nose piercing. So my parents were out of town on my 18th birthday and I was like, this is the perfect time to get my nose pierced. I went to this one piercing shop. I should have known that I shouldn't have gone to this place when I pulled up initially because it was just in an area that like a piercing shop shouldn't be located. Like right next door there was an auto shop and then like the store right after, like right next to that was like a tire store. So I was kind of like, oh, maybe they just had extra space and decided to open up a piercing shop for like some extra cash. I don't know if that's like what it looked like. I went to this piercing shop, got my nose pierced, everything was fine. Went home and you know, everything was good. About 2 days later, my nose piercing fell off in the morning. I didn't know what to do because I knew that it probably fell off when I was sleeping.
Fell off.
And that it was gonna close pretty soon if I didn't get it re-pierced back in. So I went back to the piercing shop. And
her terminologies are so great. The piercing fell off. Fell off. Well, it's actually inside, so like it would have to fall out. And then I didn't get it pierced back in. Jewelry put back in potentially.
They were closed on like a Saturday or something. I don't know if that's normal, but they were closed. So I ended up going to another piercing shop to kind of get the jewelry, the stud back into my nose. The guy there told me like, yeah, we can put it back in for you. But you should probably know like the reason why it fell out was because the stud was very cheap and it was very small. So he recommended that I put in another stud from him that would probably be a little more sturdy.
I'd say probably that wasn't the only reason it fell out. Like yes, if it was like really small and wasn't the proper size, then yeah, that would have made it easy to fall out. But like this girl seems like she has no idea about anything to do with piercing. So like so many people, it falls out in their sleep, especially at the beginning. So like that's what's happened. And or like it can just fall out when people like rub their face and it like wash their face, rub their face with a towel. It comes out in so many different ways. The jewelry probably wasn't the only reason. She may just be an idiot.
And like stay in longer. But I just wanted to put the stud back in and then just leave. So I told him, I was like, you know, this isn't gonna happen again. It's fine, just put it back in my nose and like we're all...
She is an idiot because it's like, why would you put the cheap jewelry back in your body? When like a place that by the sound of it, they know at least a little more than what this other piercing studio has done. Clear example of people not wanting to take advice that is only going to benefit them.
We're all good from here. Little did I know, for you to reinsert a jewelry back into your nose after a piercing, you sort of have to re-pierce that same hole. So I started crying. I didn't know what to do, but I was like, I'm already this committed. Like he already sanitized my nose at this point. Like I just have to do it. Probably the worst pain of my life. But you know, I had the piercing back in.
No. So like, it sounds like he's just like shoved the jewelry in and that's considered re-piercing it. See, that's not the right way to do it either. You're not supposed to do that. Basically, if that sort of thing happens where it's like she'd only had it done for 2 days and it had fallen out and she's gone in somewhere and asked them to put it back in, but most of the time it's like, it's closed. It's completely closed up. And if it isn't, shoving the jewelry back in is only going to cause more problems. If that sort of thing has happened, you generally should wait 2 weeks before re-piercing and then you can start fresh, have it done properly. It needs to be re-pierced properly, otherwise like it's just never going to heal properly.
About less than 24 hours later, I woke up, the piercing was gone again, and so I had to go back. I called the guy.
The worst people. She is the worst people. Like, this happens far too often where it's like, clearly you don't know how to look after the piercing. I'll give her some slack because the first place, the guy clearly didn't go through anything. He wouldn't have gone through aftercare with her. I'm not happy with either of these piercers. To begin with, the second guy shouldn't have put that jewelry back in. Like, if he knew that it was dodgy, he just shouldn't have agreed to it. Also, he should have given her some more information. Just that, like, you know, when you're sleeping, some people need to wear like a breathable medical tape on it just to keep it in place so that they're not pulling it out in their sleep. Yeah, he definitely should have given her a bit of info because clearly she had no clue what she was doing.
So the second I got back to the piercing shop, he knew exactly who I was. I had to go through the whole procedure with the needle in my nose again.
So he did re-pierce it the first time, which also shouldn't have been done then. They should have waited the 2 weeks and then re-pierced it. So wrong, 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 wrong. Not okay. Don't do that. Because you've got an open wound and there would be so much bacteria in it at that point, especially with dodgy jewelry, and you're going to re-pierce it and then put someone else's jewelry in. There's so many things wrong with that story. She thought she was going to two places that she could get a proper piercing, and both places have done it wrong. I wouldn't accept someone's jewelry that they've brought in to pierce with. You don't know what it's made of, and you don't know how like that particular material is going to affect the piercing. Like, most shops will pierce with their own jewelry because they know that it's of a standard. They know how the healing process and everything works with that particular material. She's got herself in a whole nother bucket of hot water.
At this point, I'm way too committed, way too deep in to not get this nose piercing anymore. But at this point, I kind of knew it was my fault, that I should have just listened to him and get like the sturdier stud to begin with. So I just decided to go ahead and get the sturdy stud the third time around.
The sturdy
since then, I still have my nose pierced.
I love that. Yeah, what kind of jewelry would you like? Yeah, I just like the sturdy one. The sturdy one looks real sturdy. Yeah, excellent choice. The sturdy one is the sturdiest one for your sturdy little nose. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Actually, I would love to hear you guys' piercing horror stories. I think it'd be really cool to put some of your horror piercing stories into a video. So if you could comment them down below. If you are new here, please subscribe to my channel, and I will be back very soon.